Hollow Knight Silksong was already legendary even before its release. Some people didn't believe it would ever see the light of a day, but now, 6 years after it was first announced, it finally launched on September 4, 2025, and every single digital storefront collapsed under the weight of player demand. Nintendo eShop, Steam, Xbox Store and PlayStation Store all went down. Their servers just couldn't handle it. If you want to know what happened and why, stick around. Hi, Olkar here, and welcome to the ride through Hollow Nest. Let's start from the beginning, with the people behind the game, specifically the two core developers without whom this game wouldn't never existed, and they are Ari Gibson and Willem Pellen. Both are responsible for the game's design, but according to Team Cherry and several interviews, Willem focused on the feel of the character movement, enemy encounters and overall game design. Ari, on the other hand, handled level design, environmental design, animations and most of the visual direction. He also contributed to the general game design alongside William, but with the stronger emphasis on the artist side. I actually found one of Ari's earlier works, a short film called The Cat Piano. It clearly had a major influence on Hollow Knight's visual style. Where Hollow Knight is themed around bugs, the Cat Piano, as the name suggests, revolves around cats. Even the dark, poetic tone carries over. Stylistically, you will notice clearly outlined characters, static backgrounds, giving it that distinct 90s cartoon look. Combined with the darker themes, the result feels both stylized and haunting. And, as Ari himself admits, much of that comes from budget limitations. If you're curious, you can watch the Cat Piano here. Alright, now that we've got some background on the team, let's take a look at what they built together. So, their first project together might surprise you. It actually wasn't Hollow Knight, it was a small game called Angry Knight. And if the main character looks familiar, you are not imagining things. The game was created for something called Ludum Dare, a game jam where developers make a complete game under strict time and team constraints, in this case 48 hours. Angry Knight was developed within that time frame, a simple game with some early stylistics, hints and a familiar protagonist, but otherwise not directly related to Hollow Knight in terms of gameplay or world. You can still play it online here. It was released on 2nd August 2014. Then, just 105 days later, something big happened. The first Hollow Knight teaser dropped, and you can see it in the background. And only 4 days after that, the Kickstarter campaign went live. In just 24 hours, the campaign reached 10% of its goal, and by the end it has reached 163% of the original 35,000 Australian dollars target. That extra funding allowed the team to expand the scope of the gameplay significantly. They even shared a detailed roadmap showing how the additional funding would improve the game's content and depth. Originally, it was meant to be a much smaller project, but the success of the Kickstarter let them work on it for 2 full years. And then, on 24 February 2017, Hollow Knight officially launches on Steam. It receives phenomenal reviews, with its Steam rating never dropping below 93% of positive reviews. Players praised almost every aspect, with only a few complaints about the game's high difficulty and tendency to get lost. But, as we've heard from interviews, that was the point. The game was designed to feel like a mysterious adventure, like a novel where you slowly uncover an unfamiliar world, paired with memorable, challenging encounters. The game, loved by players around the world, simply refused to be forgotten. Over the next 2 years, the developer released 4 major DLCs, each one expanding the game in meaningful and sometimes unexpected ways, from new sound effects and animation to entirely new bosses, location and challenges. And I won't even get started on all the content. Top, I will say my personal favorite, the platforming puzzle section called The Path of Pain. Hollow Knight was unique and it was beloved. So, let's ask the big question. Why do people love Hollow Knight so much? What makes it stand out from other games in the genre? In my opinion, it comes down to one thing. They made the game they themselves wanted to play. As the developers have said, they drew inspiration from Zelda, the old school classic Pac-Samdao, and of course the Metroid series. But unlike Metroid, they wanted to give players total freedom of exploration, something that feels more like Dark Souls 1 than the traditional Metroidvania. where there is more than one path to reach destination. Okay, passion is one thing, but execution is everything. And here, Team Sherry absolutely delivered. A responsive character, interesting active and passive abilities, that's all great. But in my eyes, what truly made the game legendary is the level design. The map is intricately crafted, interconnected and full of secrets. Every player's first playthrough is unique, giving you the feeling of being a real explorer, building a story you'll actually remember. The atmosphere and character design are also something special. How often do you get to explore a kingdom of bugs after all? Now let's talk about one of my favorite aspects, the art direction. And wow, they really went all in here. Once again, I want to bring up the cat piano because the realistic similarities are undeniable, and that's a good thing. The bold silhouettes, the contrast, the emotional lighting, it all works beautifully. From dark, crumbling corridors to variant gardens, all wrapped in one of the best soundtracks in gaming. But hey, don't just take my word for it, take a listen for yourself. All of this, paired with challenging but unforgettable boss fights and encounters, made the journey feel truly personal, like you were the Hollow Knight and this was your adventure. The game's cryptic story and subtle world building also helped foster a deeply passionate community, one that dove deep into lore, theories and secrets. Knowing there's always something happening just beyond your reach keeps you invested. The Hollow Knight cult following was also built on something very human, the face of the developers. The easy access to content for fans and creators, and the fact that all post-launch content was free, all of that made players love the game even more and more. More importantly, trust the people who made it. In 2018, Definitive Edition of Hollow Knight launches on Xbox One and PlayStation 4. The game has since sold over 15 million copies and remains one of the undisputed kings of its genre. And that brings us to Valentine's Day 2019, when the trailer for the next game was released. Hollow Knight Silksong. Originally, Silksong was supposed to be just a DLC starring Hornet, but as development went on, the mechanics became so complex that the team decided to turn it into a full standalone sequel. Alongside the reveal trailer, we also got a special Q&A session with the developers where they explained what the game would be about, and even gave fans permission to make and sell their own Hollow Knight merch as long as it wasn't on a massive commercial scale. And then silence. A silence that's eventually become a meme. Some fans lost hope entirely, others searched for sign in the sky or for any hint of a release date. At every single gaming event, people desperately look for new information. This period of waiting stretches out on for 6 long years. Until finally, on August 19, 2025 at Gamescom, the release date was revealed, and it was just 3 weeks away. The internet exploded. Fans who had already given up suddenly came back to life. Time crawled by, but at last, we reached September 4th, 2025, launch day. For 3 hours straight, it was impossible to even buy the game. The demand was so overwhelming that every single digital storefront collapsed. Almost everyone wanted to play Silksong. So, after a few hours of trying to buy a game, we have finally arrived at our title character. And now it's time to answer the big question. Was it worth the wait? Does the game live up to all the hype? Let's get straight to it. Yes, the game is fantastic. Of course, there are so few strange design decisions along the way, but let's take it step by step. For me, the weakest part of the first game, and to be clear that doesn't mean it was bad, was the combat. So let's start there. And before we dive into the improvements, let's touch on the first odd choice. Difficulty balance. Even during development of the first Hollow Knight, the team admitted that difficulty balancing was one of their toughest challenges, and the same applies here. There are few decisions that I think will probably get patched or adjusted. The first thing I noticed, environmental traps that deal 2 points of damage appear way too early in the game. That's frustrating, because it punishes exploration and movement across the map, things that should feel engaging, not discouraging. Later in the game I have no problem with it, but at the start it just feels harsh. Almost seems like the game is designed to make your move faster, more acrobatically, yet at the same time punishes you double for risky jumps. Next up, flying enemies. They are far too defensive, giving you very few openings to land hits. Sure, later in the game you gain tools to deal with them, but early on they are simply a nightmare. This creates a strange situation where in some ways the further you progress the easier certain aspects feel, not because the game gets easier overall, but because movement and enemy balance improve with time, but because your movement and equipment improve with time. And speaking of tools, here comes another controversial decision, the resource system. Instead of one resource like in the first game, we got something closer to Bloodborne Veils, consumable resource you need to collect and spend to use tools. Honestly, I think it's a weak system. The simplest fix, in my opinion, would be to limit the number of uses, but have them recharge at benches. Without that, running out of tools in the late game feel unnecessarily punishing. Now onto the good stuff, and there's a lot of it. Hornet's progression differs significantly from the first game. For starters, she now has character classes. They are simplified, but they do change her moveset and certain attacks. Most importantly, they all have one passive ability that can significantly impact the gameplay. And there are tools. These tools are divided into 3 categories, 2 passive slots and 1 active slot, usually for a weapon or special ability. They add variety to the combat, which is already excellent. Hornet's moveset is responsive and lethal. She doesn't have a huge number of attacks, but each one has a clear use case. Combined with frequent, fluid dashes, combat often feels like skating gracefully across the battlefield, slicing through the enemies with style. In short, combat has been massively improved compared to the first game. It's fast, fun, and incredibly satisfying, and aside from a few rough edges, it's a clear step forward. Let's move on to the traversal. This is another aspect that has been massively improved compared to the first game. Back then you had to constantly mash the dash button, which felt a little comical at times. Here, Hornet has both a sprint and a sprint jump, and wow, they completely changed the experience. Once again, Hornet's fluidity makes movement feel fantastic and deeply satisfying. It's another system that was good before, but it's simply so much better now. But what would traversal be without a map to explore? And this is where developers really outdid themselves. In the first game, the map was already one of its most impressive features. Here it's even better. Connecting such a massive world is no easy task, yet I never felt like I was wandering through filler areas. Those kind of zones have been pushed to the edges of the map, making them rare, while most of the locations feel meaningful and rewarding to explore. This might also be thanks to a better placement of fast travel stations. In this game, backtracking almost never felt like an issue, and I've already spent more time here than in the original game. And let's make this clear, Silksong is much larger game than its predecessor. I'm halfway through Act 3 with around 40 hours of playtime already, which is really impressive. But going back to level design, the combination of Hornet's new moveset and this expanded map makes exploring Parlum an incredible experience. Honestly, it's a world I would recommend everyone to visit. And as if all that wasn't enough, this game also treats us to the music of Christopher Larkin. Just like before, his soundtrack completely blows you away, but honestly I don't need to say more, just listen for yourself. Stylistically, the game builds on what we experienced in the first installment, but forget any sense of monotony. The color palette has been massively expanded compared to the original, and the world is simply breathtaking to look at. This is one of the best crafted worlds I've seen in a game. I would even go as far as to say that stylistically it surpasses Elden Ring, and that's not the statement I make lightly. All the sprites are hand-drawn, and it really shows. I'll say it again, there's just so much here that catches the eye. It's truly stunning. So, to sum it up, the game has either matched or maybe even surpassed its own legend. I don't think anyone could walk away disappointed. Most likely, the game will continue to receive updates and new content, which only strengthen its place as a true cult classic, which in my opinion it already is. That's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if I forgot to mention something important, let me know down in the comments. Also, I recommend checking out my own project. I'm currently working on one hit brawler, and you can find the devlogs for it right here on this channel. Take care and see you next time.